day of creativity, a stream of dreams, a palette of colors, a quiver of emotions. Music is always there, waiting. We're children born into a different age. We became young adults in a turbulent cultural environment and gained a sense of creative maturity in a world that had been stretched and changed by passionate people. How is that reflected in your music?
Huge influence from, I think, Muhammad Ali talking the way he was talking at that time. And no one was speaking like that. No one was commenting on things the way he did. And I think that it may have opened me up to say, well, if this guy can come out and talk like this, and no one was talking like that, and I thought, boy, I could probably do anything.
There's a community of ideas. There's a community of expression. Community is really an influential aspect of who we are and how we see ourselves. We can feel a part of a community that's tens of thousands of miles away, or you can be a part of this community that exists and begins right outside of your doorstep.
But that community outside the doorstep was not feeding me what I need. I had to go 10,000 miles away, and with my imagination, I knew that the world existed that I wanted to one day be a part of.
The bridge across culture is that one that allows us to feel free to scan our own curiosities.
That feeling of that innocence of a young artist, just going after what's in the heart. And that was probably the first realization that, yes, there needed to be bridges between cultures, because I was trying to scale a cultural wall.
What you said earlier about that childhood curiosity, you're pondering human ideas about what's fixed and what's infinite.
That childhood wonder that knows no boundaries between cultures. It doesn't know that. It just wants to express. And I found my vehicle and I was off and running.
Musicians, as they mature, they reflect to some sort of an image that reassures them that they're being true to what that ambition is. Are there any images that come to mind that you associate with your transforming into a participant in this great cultural conversation?
There was a scene on an elevator. The group of people were on the elevator, and I heard this elevator music, and it was the Days of Wine and Roses. Beautiful French horn solo.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And as the elevator is moving, I heard this music and I sucked in air. And I said to everyone on the elevator, did you hear that? And they all looked at me and they said, hear what? And I said, did you hear that French horn? And I'm very excited. And when we get off the elevator, someone pulled me aside and they said, son, if you're hearing things, maybe you ought to talk to your mother. All we heard was music. I felt so terrible. And I went home to my mother and I was so upset and I was pacing up and down.
So how old were you?
I was probably just 12.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, why don't they hear it? Why couldn't they hear this beautiful sound? What's wrong with people? And she stopped me and she said, you don't understand. You have a musical ear. They don't hear what you hear. I heard the horn before I really knew what it was physically. I had to ask my father what that instrument was that had that rich, deep sound. He said, oh, that's the French horn. It's a middle instrument, never gets the melody. He says, why, you like that horn? I said, gives me chills. Once I found out what it was, what the instrument was, and I made a beeline for it and started learning to play it, and hopefully would be able to express myself musically on it.
Most of the things that we want to express are beyond us anyhow.
Yeah.
What we did together on this record had many, many dimensions to it. All of them, being very personal and close to you. And so I just kind of want to just talk through that process and how did you come to the point of making this recording?
Choosing music, I think, for a CD or an album, it definitely can't help but come from your life experiences.
Mm-hmm.
For example, The Amazing Grace was my mother's favorite hymn. You look at the Gullah Novella, and that's also my African connection to Africa through my grandmother.
There's a centerpiece of Missing Miles that came about with, you'd asked me to write something for you, and it was based around the remembrance of your mother's passing. And then you also wanted to include this feeling with your relationship with Miles Davis.
A recital in memory of great people.
Right.
So I had a sister, my mother, and Miles Davis, and I thought I'd have you do a piece in memory of Miles Davis.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you came up with the Ode to a Painter of Sound. It's a subtitle.
That's right, yes.
Which was amazing. It just, I thought, okay, you got the right person. And you did one movement, which I did at the on my recital. I couldn't wait to hear the rest of the composition. You had the one movement. I said,
Right.
What's he going to write next?
We did some other pieces that were like soundscapes as well, which was the laughter.
That was, yeah.
We done laughter, and then we dealt with humor and satire. So we're dealing with that whole idea of comedy and this dimension where music of this nature does not need to be serious.
The aspect of when I showed up to record it, I said, when am I going to hear this piece? This is when you play it.
That's right.
I had never heard
talk
the piece.
about that a little
so
bit.
So it was that sense of, he wants me to just improvise on the spot. And then you told me, you can't play open horn. You have to do anything muted, any of the other tricks and effects on the horn. No natural horn.
Because when people laugh, there's all types of laughs that people do.
Exactly.
There's a lot of character in people laughing. Let's talk about the blurring line between classical and jazz musical art.
I often wished it could blur more, because there's always you always create such a stigma when people talk about one or the other. And I always wished that I could have been present with Mozart had heard the blues to see what effect it would have, or Beethoven, because they were both improvisers, and to see what they would actually do if they heard the blues and someone said, oh, here's a tonality, how about this?
That's right.
And where they would take it.
Right.
Because they wouldn't judge it. They would just jump on the piano and go, wow, what a great concept.
So what you're talking about is that blurred line is really not that at all, but it's more like a relevant depiction of today's complexities.
Yeah, it's a shame that we even need to blur it. When I felt music as a young man, I didn't divide it. I was ready to play anything. Right. There was a stage when I thought, I'm going to play this instrument, and wherever it takes me, I'm going to go.
So you've brought a lot of life to this recording, and we know the nature of life is learning as you go.
Yeah.
That leads me to ask, what was your artistic hero's journey?
I think the biggest one was playing in Carnegie Hall while my mother sat in a balcony. My mother, the person who heard me try to play the French horn the first time and get through this melody. And I remember her saying, "Go on, boy." I played some little tune and I heard it in the kitchen. And, to see her watching, now playing in Carnegie Hall,
Right. Yes.
and knowing that she knew and that she had witnessed the whole journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Is your life one story? Is it a single story, or is it a combination of stories?
It's probably what they call the never-ending story, where it's a continuum of from where you started, as a child who wonders. But the challenge is to be able to hang in there to complete all the chapters.
That's it. And to keep the wonder.
Yes, fresh.
See?
Yes,
Keep that freshness,
Keep
that
that connection.
excitement
Yes.
of awe, where you are just taken to the point that you can be completely in the present and just absorb all that's there. Absorb and participate at the same time.
that would describe the experience of playing in a major orchestra with all the sounds around you.
Right.
It's one thing to sit in the audience and listen to an orchestra,
Right.
but to be in the middle of it and to be part of it and to be listening to the music, and then all of a sudden your part comes up and you have to join in.
I think that's that whole concept of the musical body it becomes an organism. It becomes
Right.
this thing that is so highly functional that you can't really even distinguish the parts.
Music is a definite universal force that, with or without knowing, people feel it. I think that's what keeps a lot of people in music, that they can't live without music. They can't live without
Right.
that. All those amazing amounts of universal forces that are happening in the musical structure.
Right. So, who are you at this time in your life?
Now that I know, I'm glad the guy who followed his heart and his dream and didn't get sidetracked or bogged down by the, overrated idea of convention and the beaten path.
Right.
Who realized that whatever I'm hearing, that's where I'm going.